So, hello everyone, my name is Dethra Giles. I'm one of the presenters here today. I was actually here this morning judging the mock trials for mediation, the mock mediation, and that was a lot of fun to see the students in their mediation sessions, and they were all nervous and jittery and trying to figure things out. So it was very fun to see what I used to be like when I first started out doing this. So it was great to have a flashback. How many of you all are practitioners? Yay. How many of you all are students or? Yay, so that's nice. So I get to mess you up. So, but we'll have a lot of fun. We'll be interactive. I'm a very interactive trainer. So a lot of the learning happens out, not a lot of it, all of it happens out there with you all, not up here with me. So I'm gonna need for you all to be a little more interactive than you currently are. So we'll have a good time. And so this session is about what did you just say? And how this came about is because I'll actually to the phrase a little bit later, but does anyone in here know a person by the name of Frank Giles? No. Good. Okay, because he's my husband. And and so every now and again he says something extremely brilliant, but simply because he's my husband, I can't let him know that. So he says a phrase that I often use, and he says all the time that there's not so much doing right and wrong as there is understanding and misunderstanding. My problem is he seems to be the person that's always misunderstanding, but we're cool with that. But how that came about is I realized that oftentimes when I'm in mediation, I realize that our people are arguing and they're in conflict, and it's not really about an issue, it's about definitions. It's about what are we talking about, and so that's how this session really came about, and so we'll go through it. But I have a clip that I used from The Waterboy. Has everyone seen The Waterboy? How many of you have seen The Waterboy? Classic cinema. You have to see. Have to see The Waterboy, but it's a small clip from The Waterboy.
So, why you pick this class anyway? It's pretty hard. Oh, beautiful view. All right. Y'all shut up now. Last week, we talked about the physiology of the animal brain as it pertains to aggression. Now, is there anyone here who can tell me why most alligators are abnormally aggressive? I know the answer to this question. Raise your hand. Anybody? Anyone? Yes, please.
Mama said that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Yeah. Your mama said alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth and no toothbrush. Wow. Anybody else? Yes, please.
Alligators are aggressive because of an enlarged medulla oblongata. It's the section of the brain which controls aggression.
That is correct. The medulla oblongata. The medulla oblongata is where anger, jealousy, and aggression come from. Now, is there anybody here who can tell me where happiness comes from? Anyone? All right. Let's hear what Mama has to say on the subject.
Mama said that happiness is from magic rays of sunshine that come down when you're feeling blue.
Well, folks, Mama's wrong again.
Don't call her Savage, you're wrong. Mama's right.
Right, something wrong with his medulla oblongata.
So what did we learn from this about what did you just say? Are we knocking people out? What do we get from it? Aside from the fact that now we know where anger, jealousy, and aggression comes from, and that happiness is not caused by little rays of sunshine that turn blue. Maybe it is.
If the professor had phrased himself a little bit more gently, it would have gone over a lot better, and not brought out that rage. Yeah, he could have phrased things a little better.
Could have made things, said things a little bit differently. Was the professor right?
Yeah, it was accurate.
As far as we know, we don't really know that, I don't personally know that, I haven't researched it. But what he said was right, but how he said it was completely wrong. How he approached it, how this person felt, their own emotions that were attached to it. And when we're dealing with conflicts, we're in the same situation. No one comes to us with just the straight situation. No one ever comes to us with the issue is this person stole my Coke from the refrigerator. There's all the emotions of years and years attached to it, and so sometimes we have to deal with that. So it's not about what did you just say, it's often what did you actually mean by that, because they attach meaning to it. I remember once I was dealing with 2 employees in a battle, and they brought me an email and said, look what she just said. And I read the email, and the email said, I need the numbers in the document by 2 o'clock on Friday. It was just simple words, and that was all it said. And the person said, no, what she's saying is, I don't know my job, and I can't do my job, and she's calling me incompetent. I said, that's funny, because all this email says is, I need the document by 2 o'clock on Friday. And so we have to realize that it's not about what someone just says, it's about the meaning that people attach to it. You raise your hand?
Often when we ask a question, we'll only accept one right answer.
Because I'm right. And we ask questions with an answer in mind. It's not really that neutral. As mediators, we're neutral. So even as mediators, we have a responsibility to behave neutrally. But are we actually neutral? Are we gonna lie to each other here? We're not really neutral. We have a responsibility to behave in a neutral fashion, but in our head, even we already have the answer to that. Like, does that really make sense to everyone? And we're shaking our head. Does that really make sense to everyone? Because we have it in our head too, but we have a responsibility to behave neutrally. So we have to be mindful of things like that. And so, with that said, I know everyone just got their session, and we are all electronic slaves. And so we probably have checked at least 15 voicemails, text 5 people, and answered 3 emails on the way here from the auditorium. So you might have forgotten to turn your cell phone back off, so please put it on vibrate if you have not. It was funny because I was watching the debates last night, and the moderator said that when her son put some song on her phone and it went off in the White House briefing, I just fell out laughing like, please Lord, don't let it ever be me. Participate. Again, I am a very interactive person. This session is really not about me. It's about you all. It's about us. We're all practitioners. We're people that are learning theory. And so interact. Give your comments. Give your feedback. Give your scenarios. People want to hear that. So this is your session, not mine. Respect your fellow participants. Also, we'll share information, and you'll have situations that you've been in that you can relate. But I will remind you that the Metro Atlanta area is a very big, small town, and so please change the names to protect the guilty, because we don't want anything getting back to anyone that you said about them, but please be willing to share. Just change the names to protect everyone, and enjoy the time. Have fun. This session is about having fun, getting to know each other, and getting the most information possible. And so, people always ask me, I've been doing this for a very long time, and they will ask me, what is your philosophy around conflict resolution, and around communication, and around getting better understanding about people? And I will tell people I can give you a 15-minute session quickly without a full hour, or the full 50 minutes to tell you what my philosophy is around conflict resolution and conflict management. And my favorite philosopher in the whole wide world is Kenny Rogers, who set my conflict resolution philosophy with the gambler. And he said, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, and know when to run. And that's what I live by. Because at each point in the conflict, we may have to do either one of those, but particularly be very conscientious of when to run. And I tell people, if I run, just follow me, because that's a good way to go. But here's the thing. You don't get harmony when everyone sings the same note. And so the idea is not just necessarily, and people will have different ideas. People will use conflict resolution and conflict management and ADR, but I love the term management, because conflict is never really ever going to go away, and we don't want it to. As conflict resolution practitioners and studiers and students, we know that conflict can be very good. It's not the conflict that's bad, it's how we manage ourselves and the people in the conflict that matters. And so that's what we really want to learn about. And so with that said, In the next few minutes, I am not gonna make you mediators. We're not gonna create world peace. You're not gonna leave here and go back to wherever you are and go into every mediation and everybody's gonna leave holding hands, skipping down the hall singing Kumbaya. It's not gonna happen. But what we can do is give you tools and teach you ways to be a better practitioner, to be more effective, and to teach people to handle conflict in a more efficient and productive fashion. All right? And so with that said, I remember I used to work here at Georgia State. I used to work here at Georgia State, and when I started, I was here for about 8 years. And on my first day on the job, I came in and I was bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and I had all the things in the world I was gonna do. I had just gotten my master's in conflict management, and I was gonna save the world with that. I just knew I was, and I had all these things that needed to be done. And I went to my boss, and on the first day of work, first of all, I should have known something was gonna go terribly awry when she said, I wanna tell you something very important. Working here is like working in dog years. Every year is about 7. I said, okay, great, that's a great thing. You should have said that in the interview process. Maybe make some different choices. And then later on, she came to me, I was in some meetings and I had all these ideas and I went back to my office and I was so frustrated because things weren't going the way I thought they should go. Everyone wasn't on board with these great ideas. I tested them out in the market. I talked to everyone and knew what people wanted. And I said, hey, why is this going my way? And she came to my office and gave me this little yellow piece of paper that was on this little sticky note. And she stuck it on my screen and walked off. I said, what's this? She said, it's your reality check. Everything is not always gonna go the way you have it in your head. So when you walk into a situation, truly behave in a neutral fashion. Walk away knowing that just because it didn't go the way you wanted to go, doesn't mean everything is gonna work out that way. And so I had to walk into situations differently. How is this gonna turn out based on what I thought was gonna happen and based on what's actually gonna happen? And what are people actually saying? Are they saying, no, your ideas are horrible, or no, we can't really do them that way right now? And so I had to change how I perceived communication. I had to change how I perceived what people were saying. So I started thinking, are other people experiencing the same thing? And the answer was yes. We often attach meaning to what people are saying. I took, no, we can't do that right now, as in, no, you're a horrible person, you don't know what you're doing, and we don't value who you are, what you say, or what you bring to the table. And all they said was, no, we can't do that right now. So I walked away feeling defeated. And so oftentimes when we're in mediations, or in conflict resolutions, or in facilitating discussions, we have to be the people that make sure everyone's on the same page with what did they say and what did you hear, and let's bring the two together. And how often do we experience that? Oftentimes we're in a conflict and people are saying, well, what you said was, and they're saying, no, that's not what I said. And we have to make people change that language. What I heard was. And that's why it's often one of the biggest sessions I remember that was so instrumental for me in my process was when we had the process where we had to repeat and reframe. Reframing is so important. Can you tell me what you heard that person say? Because when they tell you what they heard them say, it's very different than what they actually said or even what they meant. And so that's our reality check. You have to be honest and say that sometimes we didn't hear what the person said. And so here's my husband's phrase. There is not so much doing right and wrong as there is understanding and misunderstanding. And how this came about in our house was we lived in the same house for about 8 years. And for the first 4, we had the biggest arguments about the trash. Because the trash pickup goes out every Friday about 7 o'clock in the morning. Every Friday about 7:15, guess who on the block was in an argument about the trash? The Giles household. Because what would happen on Thursday night, I would say, babe, are you taking the trash out? What would he say? Yes, I'm gonna take the trash out. 7 o'clock in the morning, I would hear the trash truck go by, I would look outside, and our trash was in the back of the house. Babe, I thought you said you would take trash out. And he said, I am. Precisely when? Because the trash leaves at 7 o'clock. And he said, I said I was gonna do it, I am gonna do it. What I meant was, in time for Robertson Trucking to pick it up. What he meant was, when I get around to it, which is eventually, which means next week we'll have maggots on the trash can outside. But it was a breakdown, and we were fussing, but we were fussing about definitions. I meant, and he thought. We both were saying the same thing, the trash needs to go out and it will get out. But we weren't clear. I thought I was very clear. But it wasn't clear, so we're arguing about the definition. And so when we talk about it, the definitions actually matter. So with this, let's talk about these words that we use all the time. So what percent of the time would you say sometimes is? If you say I do this sometimes I go running. What percent of the time is that? I never go running. What percent of the time is that?
Probably the most.
1 to 10%.
I think it's higher.
Higher. What number would you say?
Probably 40, 50.
40, 50%. So we have between 1 and 10 and between 40 and 50 other numbers for sometimes. 20%. What about always? I always do that. 95. Let's be honest when we say let's be honest here. Remember the reality check? Let's be honest. 95%, 100%. What else? Always.
You say you always is very different than I always.
Right, exactly. You always and I always are very different. What about never? I never do that.
Never say never.
Never say never. What percent of the time is that?
Very low.
10, 15, 2. What about early? How early? What is early? What time is early? Is early 5 minutes, 10 minutes? What is early?
Karen's been the wrong guy.
Because you're always late. What is late?
My wife.
Early is 10 minutes before and late is 10
And
minutes
it's after. What is on time? Really?
Or within 3 minutes.
Within 3 minutes of the time.
Actually, early for me, no, on time is 2 minutes early.
See, I was raised as a
For me,
performer. I'm a trained dancer, and I was always taught to be early is to be on time is to be late, and to be late is to be left.
Wow.
Ooh, yeah.
So you don't show up for a performance if it's, and what do you define as on time? If you have to be work on time, does that mean you're walking in the door at 8? Or does that mean your computer is on and you're typing and actually working at 8? What is on time? See where the conflict falls in the definition? Because guess what? If I tell you I am always early, and early for me is 3 minutes, and early for you is 30, in your mind, I am never on time. And so when we're in a conflict, I say, I get here early just to help you out. And you're saying, girl, please, you are always late. And we're having an issue about definitions because we both acknowledge I get here, say I start work at 8 o'clock. We both can acknowledge I get here at 7:57 every day. So we agree on that part, but you think I'm never early, I think I'm always early, and now I think you're ungrateful and you think I'm incompetent. And now we're in a fight, and we're not even fighting about the actual issue, we're fighting about the definition. And so what happens? When this happens, you get people, you get personalities, you get background, you get experiences, and it all comes into play. And guess what? You have to fetter through all of that. That now all becomes your issue, it all becomes your problem, it all becomes something that you have to figure out. And so let's try it for ourselves. And so, does everyone have something they can write on? Yay. Okay, so here's the thing that we have to often fetter through and get through in the process. We have to get through in the process of figuring out where all these issues come from. It's around self-awareness. And there are 3 components that we put into this. That's self-knowledge, self-understanding, and self-acceptance. And everyone gets to get the luxury of doing this. I'm like, all honored. So everyone gets to get the pleasure of doing this, but when you're in your session with people, you have to fetter through all this without them having the luxury of doing it. So I'm going to do it for you really quickly so we get an idea of where some of this stuff comes from. And so the first piece is self-knowledge. Thank you. The first piece is self-knowledge. What are your issues? Does everyone know what a trigger is? So I want you to think of what are 5 of your triggers. What are the 5 things that just set you off? And for those who may not know, a trigger is that thing that pushes you over the edge. That I realize that if for some unknown reason, as I get older, smacking is a huge trigger for me. I don't know why. So if I'm out in public, I cannot enjoy my meal if someone's smacking. And so I realize that if I'm in mediation or in a session and people are chewing gum, I have to really control myself. I hate to be biased, but would you mind taking that gum out? So what is a trigger for you? What are those 5 things that push you over the edge? Write them down really quickly. Everyone have a chance to write them down? Okay, so we're about mid-session. So here is something I always do if I'm at a conference or something in a session. I always want to make the other classes jealous that they did not come to my class. So, like mid-session, I always stop, and on the count of 3, I make everyone in my session laugh really, really loudly. So everyone in the other session is like, dang it, I knew I should have gone to that session, because you're sitting there like, which one do I want to go to? I'm going to go to this one or that one, I'm going to go to that one. So we're going to make them regret that they did not come to our session. So on the count of 5, you all have to laugh like really, really loudly. So everybody over there is like, what? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Y'all gave it a good shot. That's a good try, but everybody's like, dang, why are you laughing over here? And so the important thing about self-knowledge is knowing what some of those issues are. Sometimes people haven't tapped into those issues. And they don't even know why this conflict is a conflict for them. Why do I have a trouble around this person calling me this or saying this particular thing about me? Where did this even come from? So the second thing is understanding, where did that issue come from? For me, time is an issue. I know where it came from because I was raised as a performer, number 1, and 2, I grew up in a military household. I have actually been left in Savannah, Georgia because I was not ready by 4 a.m. when my mother was leaving to go to Miami, Florida. And so I know for me, time is huge. And so I'm the person that is always early, using those words that we learn we have to define. I'm an early bird. I'm always 30 minutes to an hour early. And people are thinking, why are you here? I'm fine. I have something to do. I have my iPad, my iPod, my something. I can work, but I'm an early person. But where did that come from? So pick 2 of yours on your trigger list and identify, where did that come from? Why am I like this? Why is this an issue for me? And the last piece is going to be self-acceptance. You know who you are, you know where these issues came from, you understand how you got that way, and accepting, you know what, this is who I am. And I might not be able to change it, but it's not about changing it, it's about changing the behavior. For me, learning happens when a change in behavior occurs. And so here's a philosophy, and here's a difficult piece about self-awareness that's often hard for people to swallow. Knowing who you are does not give you permission to be that way. Can we say that together? Knowing who you are does not give you permission to be that way. And so it's not saying you have to change, you have to be something different. For example, I am bossy. I'm sorry, I accept it. I know that I'm bossy. been that way. I'm an only child. I can blame it on a bunch of things. But I am. It doesn't give me permission to go in and bulldoze everyone into doing what I want to do. It doesn't give me permission to always take over. And it doesn't even give me permission to always be the boss. Of course, we all think we have great ideas, and we always think that our idea may be the best, but it doesn't give us permission to force it on others. If you are a person who's always early, it doesn't give you permission to make everybody get up 2 hours early to be on time with you. So knowing who you are doesn't always give you permission to be that way. And so it's important to recognize what are these issues, what are my triggers, what are the things that set me off, but also recognize that it doesn't give me permission to put those things on other people. And so when we're in conflict, the problem is everyone hasn't gone through this exercise. Some people don't know their triggers, and people will ask them that infamous question, what is your problem? And the answer is, I don't have a problem. Or you're my problem. Or whatever the case may be. And so we have to realize that all of these things play into it. Everyone has their triggers, and they're very different from yours. Some of the things that set you off, other people love doing. There are people that, in other cultures, smacking is a compliment. Make sure not to visit those places. Yeah, belching or burping, and that's my cultural norm, and it's not fair to put that on other people. And so I will sit and cringe, but I recognize that in some places I've been to houses, a friend of mine is from another country, and in their house, if you're not smacking, you're not really enjoying the food. Like, yeah, I can't come back. I love y'all so much, but can we just go out for drinks? Go eat together. But again, knowing who you are doesn't give you permission to always be that way, okay? And so this is what we often find when we're in the process of mediation. No one wants to understand the other side. We're not arguing about definitions. We're arguing because I'm right and you're wrong. And no one actually named their child random. Someone said, who named their child random? I said, stop. It was just some random kid that I didn't know. But I was at it was a t-ball game, some kid game, t-ball game, and the kid lost, and the mom, he lost it. He was throwing bats and everything, and he was just having a meltdown. And the mom said, well, you can't win them all. He said, I can't win them all, but I can sure make them wish they lost. And some people approach their conflicts that way. And I remember a phrase someone taught me was, you would rather be right than be happy. And people will approach a situation that way. I would rather be right, everything else be gone. I would rather be right. I don't care if the company fails. I don't care if we get divorced. I don't care if the kids don't get to go to a great school. I would rather be right. And so when we think about that, we have to ask them, what does that mean for you? What does being right mean for you? Always remembering, it's not about your position. It's about the interest involved. What's the interest here? What is important to all of us? What gets us all on the same page to get people off of that communication gap? Okay, I want this and you want that, and it doesn't come together. Understanding, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not this person. If I can't win, then I'll make you wish that you lost. But that was funny. I said, that's class. Got to find a way to use that. So here, let's see. We have, now remember these scenarios were made up for students because initially they told me I had a student session. So Jane and Cheryl used to be best friends and roommates, but now they hate each other. They argue constantly because of a disagreement they had. They both agreed that no boys were allowed to stay over and sleep in the room. Jane's brother stayed the weekend, and Cheryl and Jane have been on the house ever since. Where's the communication breakdown? So on each row you have 3 people. I want you to collude with your 3, over here you have 4. Collude with your 3 and figure out where the breakdown happened.
Because what did they say?
All right.
So it wasn't a boyfriend, so she thought it was a
Did y'all resolve it already?
So what did you do? it's a family
Yes.
So it's a matter of. But one person and the other's boy. Yeah. So you have to do
Okay, so let's talk about it. Throw some things out. What did you all come up with?
Define boys.
Hey, that could be true. That could be true.
Right.
What else? Because I will tell you, a moment of transparency, all of my scenarios come from real life situations, so there's always more detail, so I will have more information for you if you ask. What else did you all come up with? Define boy, which is very key because the things were changed to protect the guilty. Cheryl, well, Jane did say that. Jane said, I thought we meant like dating boys. I didn't think family factored into that. And so defining boy was a key issue for them. What else?
Define exceptions to that rule.
Define exceptions. What else? Y'all were all talking, and I know y'all had something to say.
I think we also the same, but we talked about the framing and what
Mhm.
one person heard and what the other person heard.
And that's so true. What Cheryl heard was, well, what Cheryl meant was absolutely no boys. And no sleepovers, no nothing, no other chromosomes. For her, boys was very clear. For Jane, it was like, I thought you meant dating boys. I thought you meant no sex. I thought you meant all that, the stuff that comes with having boys sleep over, because these were college students. And the frame of reference was Cheryl had been a victim of sexual assault. And so for her, and it was a situation where someone had someone sleep over, but they didn't share that information until me, the poor little RA who had no clue what the heck was going on, gets the situation. And so there was a frame there. So her communication from that perspective was, boys sleeping over are dangerous. Jane's perspective was, this is my brother. He doesn't count. He's not a boy.
He can cause no harm.
Yeah, he's just Sean. He doesn't count as a boy. You know, we can walk around in our underwear. He's just Sean. And so there was a communication breakdown because what she meant was, I want to be protected from feeling danger. And what she thought was, you don't want us to be breaking any moral issues in the room. And so their communication and what they meant was very different. Talking about the same thing, because they both agreed, no boys. That was the agreement. They signed the agreement, no boys over the weekend. And so they had a communication breakdown. It wasn't necessarily the issue itself, it was a communication, it was a misunderstanding. And Jane didn't think she was doing anything wrong, and Cheryl thought she was being totally disrespectful. They ended up not living together afterwards. It didn't work out. They had issues that continued, but that was because she felt completely disregarded. And she could not get past feeling disregarded, even though she hadn't shared the information about her assault. But again, a communication breakdown. They were able to live together amicably until then.
I have a question. Do you think it would have helped if they had shared the interest? What was the common interest behind the statement saying no boys were allowed?
Right.
What is it that they were looking to achieve?
And it was interesting when I was on I learned a lot from this session, which really started me down the path towards ADR, was that when people come to an agreement, that sometimes agreements aren't really clear. And so what I did that next year as an RA is I sat down with all of my residents, which took forever, and came up with roommate agreements. And we sat down and talked about what people meant by that. And that year I got an award for having no issues on my own. Because it took a lot of work, but people were very clear about what was acceptable and what wasn't. And when someone violated a rule, people felt comfortable. It wasn't this strain of, is it okay to say something? Can I go? It was like, no, well, you kind of, yeah, exactly. Literally, they were like, number 4?
Yeah.
You just did that.
Redefined.
And I'm sorry, I'll go backtrack. So it made it a lot easier. So this type of thing was, let's be clear about what that meant. And there was a lot of people coming to college saying that they weren't going to do one thing, and by the end of the year they were doing that thing. And so it was fun. Those are the fun times. Okay, so what about this one? Jason and Daniel are trying to come up with an agreement on how to share their new car. Because we all know that sharing a car is always the easiest thing to do between two people who have different agendas. Thus far, they have agreed that Jason will get the first and third weekend, Daniel will get the second and fourth weekend, and they will alternate the fifth or split the weekend. The person who has it for the weekend will be responsible for gassing it up that week, and they will split the maintenance costs. Where is the potential for miscommunication? Talk amongst yourselves.
Well, we
Alright, so let's throw them out. Because there is so much stuff here that we could do this one for the rest of the afternoon and still not come up with the resolution that we're. I will tell you, I just told the group up here that these were two brothers, and by the end of it, the parents were like, sell the car. The car is going somewhere. So what is the potential for miscommunication here?
Definition of what a weekend is, when the first weekend.
When does the weekend start?
When does the weekend start?
When do you gas up?
What does gassing up mean?
What does
Does it
gassing
mean
up
$20 of gas or a whole tank of
Because one of the brothers said,
gas?
as long as it's on a half tank, you're good.
Yeah.
The other brother, who was the more responsible one, said, it needs to be on F.
Full tank.
It needs to be a full tank. And so that was a disagreement. What else?
Definition of the maintenance cost.
Maintenance cost. Because one person said maintenance was like the tune-up, which is the spark plugs and all that stuff. The other one was like, you change the oil every 3 months and not even change the filter, just pour some more oil in there. And so they're like, no. And then he was saying we need to save up enough money to make sure we get the big annual, make sure the brakes are good, we have to get the brakes done, and this is gonna cost this much money. The other one was like, if it's stopping, it's okay.
They never talked about insurance, was that?
Insurance.
Discussion?
Hello. Well, they were 16 and 17 or 17 and 18, and the parents said, I'm glad you all were responsible enough to save up this money to buy the car, but you need insurance.
They also didn't define who owns the car, and there could only be one owner of the car.
Couldn't define who owned the car, and around insurance, go back to insurance really quickly, they didn't define who would pay the increased premium as one person got a ticket. And one person got a ticket. And they were both below 25, unmarried, in high school, so their premium shot up like a couple $100 a month.
Wow, twin boys.
Oh, yeah. But the owner, it was, well, who owns this car? Whose title is it in? Whose name is the title in?
Right.
It was a big issue, and so the parents resolved it by saying it's in our name. Because that became an issue when they first bought the car, which to me said, clearly this is gonna go downhill from here.
Did one pay more than the other?
No, it was an even amount.
Okay.
It was an even amount, but it became an issue when it was time to sell it because back to the maintenance issue. One person felt like they put more money into maintaining the car than the other person did, so they should have gotten a bigger share of the proceeds from the sale of the car.
That's just a mess.
We were not even talking about, what about the month of February if they don't have a 4th and 5th week?
It was disastrous because they thought, what they initially thought, and the parents said we thought it made sense too, was that the weekends would be this this prime time to have your car, but these were two very active teenagers. They were involved in sports activities during the week. The parents were like, the reason you got a car is so I don't have to come get you, and y'all are still fighting, I still have to come get you anyway. So it became a real big issue because the weekends weren't the issue. It was Monday through Friday, and someone had a track meet out of town, but the other person had a basketball game out of town, and so who gets to take the car out of town? So it was disastrous. But again, they all agreed. They agreed on splitting the maintenance. What is maintenance? They agreed on gassing up the car. But what is gassing up? They agreed on all these things, and so what they were really fighting about were definitions, but the devil is in the details. They didn't get down to the details of it, and so that's the other thing is when we're looking at writing up our agreements in times when we're having mediations or facilitations and we're writing our agreements, it's important that those agreements are clear. What exactly do you mean by Friday? You know, I'll get that to you on Friday, and we leave the agreement saying, okay, Friday's fine. And someone sitting around on Friday thinking, you sent it to me at 11:59 p.m. on Friday. Surely that does not count. And they're like, it was Friday. And we agreed on Friday. And so it's very important that we get that communication piece out. That's why it's always people say, you know, when you say, what did you just say? I don't mean something offensive. I mean, well, what did you mean by what you just said? I heard you. I heard that we're going to meet at the corner of this and that, but at what time? Because I was there at 6 and you didn't show up till 7 and I left. So it's very important that we get that out. So the reality is, you may never get rid of all miscommunication, but the better check, the more you identify it, the more you see the potential for there to be miscommunication, and the more you drill down to what do we mean by that. And sometimes, one of the things I love about being a mediator is that I get to be Columbo. I get to be the dumbest person in the room, and it is absolutely okay. I can ask all the crazy questions like, so by Friday, did you mean Friday morning or Friday night? Well, of course I meant Friday morning because it's during the workday. Well, exactly what time during the workday? I get to ask those questions, and it's our job. It's our job to make sure that those areas for potential issues down the road are eliminated as much as possible. My little sticky note to you with the reality check, you're not going to eliminate it all. But what you're giving people are the tools to manage it, because what happens is when they walk away from you asking all those questions, what they realize is, you know what? I need to ask some questions next time someone says this to me. I need to ask questions about how we're going to do this. What does this look like? What does getting this project completed? What does being a good roommate look like? What does that mean for you? What do you mean by boy? What do you mean by sleep over? Because if he leaves before the sun rises, did he actually sleep over? What is that? If we stayed up all night and we didn't go to sleep, does that count? What do we mean by these things? So getting the communication piece out is important. And so I don't have a lot of time, but I want to go to these really quickly. How some of this plays in, how many of you all have seen the disc? I have used the disc. No? Okay, so the disc is a very good tool. I also use Myers-Briggs and others, True Colors and things like that. But the disc is a very good tool because one is very short and simple and concise and easy to communicate. But how some of these things come into play is that you have these players that have these different personality traits, and you have the D, the I, the S, and the C. The I is lowercase because someone, when they were submitting their copyright, made a mistake and put a lowercase I. And by the time they realized it was a mistake, it was done. And so it was cheaper just to keep it as lowercase I. So it wasn't my mistake. But the D is for dominance. And so these people are typically very domineering, not in a negative way, but they're just very take charge. Let's get things done. Not a lot of time, want to get things done quickly and not really spend a lot of time spinning their wheels going over things. We find these people in mediation because they're thinking, first of all, why are we here? Couldn't we have talked about this? And do we need to take a whole hour to talk about this? We can get this done in 5 minutes. I can tell you what the problem is. The problem is I'm right, she's wrong, let's go. We have them, and that's the reality. They're thinking, you know, because they don't take offense to things. It was wrong, sorry, keep it moving, let's go. Then you have your I. Your I are your influencers. These are your people. They know everyone. I have a good friend from college who's a high I. Does anyone know where Hawkinsville, Georgia is? I'd be dead on every time I go somewhere someone knows about it. She is from Hawkinsville, Georgia, which is a very small town. It's about the size of Georgia State University. It's small, and I promise you, everywhere we go, she knows someone. We did a semester abroad in Spain, and we studied, most of our time we spent in Spain, when we were in Spain and Switzerland, and spent time in Morocco and other places. And we got off the plane in Madrid, Spain. I promise you. She said, hey, you can't know someone in Madrid. You're from Hawkinsville. So she did. She knows people everywhere, but she's a high eye. She's that person that loves people. She will meet a person in the grocery store, and now they're best friends, and they're doing lunch tomorrow. That's an eye. These are the people, they have a lot of emotion. They have a lot of feelings. So they come, they want to talk about what happened. They want you to experience that, because you need to know that to understand how we got here. Then you have your S. These are your steady people. They are people, the people that will typically be at an organization for years and years. And you say, you've been there for 30 years? They're a high S. They like for things to stay the same. They take change, but change with gradual. Don't just spring change on them. And then you have your C, which is your conscientious people. These are people that like information. They like data. They like to analyze things. They like for information to be right. They don't want to do things quickly and wrong. They want to kind of drag them out and make sure that information is all together. With all these different attributes, they all receive information very differently. Any one of these, you give a project and you say, hey, we have to get this project done. It needs to be done by this amount of time. They all heard the same thing. We have a project, it has to be completed by January 15th. They all got the same information. The communication, what processes and goes through their mind is very different. The D is saying, oh, let's get on and get it done right now. January 15th is way too long, get it done by next week. And you're thinking, you have until January 15th. That's not what they heard. They heard I have a project to get it done. The I is thinking, ooh, let's talk to some people to find out how we can get this thing done. Let's have a group meeting, to have a lunch, have a soiree, and let's decorate and have all this stuff. And they're thinking, we're gonna have a party around this thing. That's them. The S is thinking, okay, while y'all are doing that, what are my tools, what I need to get done, and let me get this thing done. I'll take until January 15th, but the whole time I'll have a nice, steady pace getting it done. I don't wanna talk to y'all about it. I don't wanna have meetings about it. Let's just all get to work. And the C is thinking, somebody give me the budget. I need to see the numbers. I need to know how many people we're gonna have working on this thing. I need to know when it's supposed to be done, what are the specs, who do I talk to, and how do I get all this information I need before y'all don't do anything until I get any numbers to you. All these people heard the same exact thing. We have a project due on January 15th. They all processed it very differently, and this is what we deal with when we're in a conflict. And so we get all these people together and we say, all these ideas make a great project team. And they get together, and with all their ideas, what happens? We have the clash of the titans, because everyone is right and no one wants to be wrong, and they would rather be right than be happy. And so with that said, we have our backpack of tools. I always get my mom, so I have that from Dora the Explorer. So the first thing is we define what the issue is. We define where is the breakdown. Are we really arguing about a particular situation, or are we arguing about definitions? Are we having that little issue of what time on Friday, who pays for maintenance, or is it really a major issue? And so really define what the problem is. Also, we're working towards resolution. This is about win-win, getting everybody off of their positions and back to the interest. The interest is that project is due on January 15th. How do we most effectively and efficiently get to a successful project end by January 15th? Then, allow for real communication. This is often the part. We tend to go into a passive-aggressive mode. We don't want to hurt feelings, but I still want to be right. And so we're really sweet about telling you you're wrong. I remember when I first moved to Georgia, I had to learn that bless your heart is not necessarily a compliment. And they would say, she just don't know, bless her heart. And I would say, they're just blessing me all around. They're like, no, they're not really blessing you. But we're really sweet about it. But we're really sweet about having passive-aggressive behaviors around how we miscommunicate and how we have conflict. So allow for real communication. How do we start talking about the real issues? What's really going on here? I often try to get people to assume a lack of information rather than assuming offense. Because the first assumption is what you said was in order to offend me. We assume the worst about what people say. We assume the best about our intentions, but assume the worst about what they intend. So have people assume the best intentions and assume a lack of information as opposed to a malintent. And put your resolutions in writing. I don't have to tell you all that. You all know how important it is to get those resolutions in writing. making sure that people are able to look at it, not because you're necessarily documenting, but because when we read things and see them on paper, we can really see, well, what did you mean by this? We get a better idea of what was intended, or to say, well, you know what, I see what you wrote, and that's not really what I meant. So get them in writing, and then follow up on whatever you resolve. Follow up on the resolutions. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, things that seem like they will work may not work at all. And so we can't just walk away from the situation if you're that person to follow up. But if you're not, make sure that your parties have a way of following up. Make it a part of the resolution. In a month, we're gonna check in and see how this is working. In 2 weeks, we're gonna check in and see what you think happened here, how this is working out for you all. So make sure there's a mechanism for you to follow up. And I would ask you, what is your plan, but we are out of time. Oh, I'm sorry. So we are way out of time. Well, not way out of time. I like to be early, but we're 5 minutes out of time. Sorry. I really want to give you all a chance to ask questions and share, but there's a lot of information to plug into this. But thank you all so much.